Hello and welcome to the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT as we review the Premier League weekend. I'm Sam Matterface and I'll be in the company of the talkSPORT football correspondent Alex Crook and the assistant editor of The Mirror, an all-round nice guy, Darren Lewis. Let's get to it because there's so much to talk about.
What a finish this is from Miguel Almiron. It finishes Tottenham 1, Newcastle 2. It's now back-to-back defeats for Tottenham.
When you go 2-0 down, it's not simple. It's not easy.
I think Miggy deserves the credit for everything that he's doing currently, but he's adding goals really, and I think that's changing people's perceptions of his performances.
Gentlemen, let's start with Spurs against Newcastle.
It's not a good look for Spurs, is it, at the moment? Back-to-back defeats, and I think Newcastle deserved their win, to be honest. I think Spurs were fortunate to only lose by one.
Yeah, I think it is. I actually expected Spurs to win, I have to be honest. A really poor performance to go with the defeat against Manchester United in midweek, so I expected a reaction in this game, and we didn't get it. But I do think that Conte's always been consistent about the fact that he will need more than one transfer window to turn things around. There are players he's always said he needs at the club that he didn't get in the summer. Bastoni, the centre-half at Inter Milan, he's a big fan. He needs leadership in that defence. He doesn't have it at the moment, particularly when Romero's not available to him. He also needs a creative midfielder. He doesn't have one. That would stop Harry Kane dropping into midfield and not being where he should be in the penalty box like Erling Haaland. So there are other pieces to be put into that jigsaw, but you're talking about 3 defeats in 5 games. I think Spurs will take being third in the Premier League at the moment, given the run they're on.
Newcastle, excellent, and they've bought incredibly well. They've pieced together a squad sensibly, despite the fact everyone's talking about their new wealth and they've got so much to spend. They've actually put together what is a very sensible squad that has been well coached, and they've got a great framework. Congratulations to Eddie Howe for doing that. I think his biggest magic trick, though, Crook, is bringing the best out of the Paraguayan international, Miguel Almiron. He scored 6 goals this season. Now, either it is Eddie Howe's brilliant coaching or it is Jack Grealish's barb. Which one was it?
I think I'll go for Eddie Howe's coaching. Listen, if Jack Grealish in any way has fired Miggy Almiron up, then I'm sure Newcastle and their fans are grateful. But he is just about, probably alongside Granit Xhaka, the most reborn player in the Premier League. It was a brilliantly taken goal. He's banging form. Newcastle fans always had a soft spot for him, actually, just because of his work rate and endeavour. But he's backing that up now in terms of what he's producing in front of goal.
Callum Wilson, impressive again. Obviously, there's so much competition for places at that top end now in the England squad, which is great. Callum Wilson, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, trying to get behind Harry Kane, Tammy Abraham, etc., etc. Shame there's not as much competition in the defensive battalion, but anyway, that's another story. Let's talk about that first goal, though, because there was a little bit of confusion, VAR. I was standing in the talkSPORT offices as Callum Wilson went running towards goal, and Hugo Lloris got a little bit of a rush to the rush of blood to the head, came steaming out, collided with Callum Wilson. I must admit, they looked at it so much that I thought they're going to rule it out. They're going to rule it out. It was never a foul for me. What did you think, Darren?
I agree with you. It's never a foul. I think as far as Lloris is concerned, I tweeted about it yesterday. He's got at least one rick in him. As world-class as he might be, every so often he has these rushes of blood that cost his team. I was at a couple of games last season. It has these rushes of blood that cost his team so often, and it wouldn't surprise me if long-term Antonio Conte were looking for a younger, newer keeper. Fraser Forster's a number 2. He's not a number 1. And I think particularly if you want to aspire to the kind of thing that Conte aspires to, you need a consistent keeper who's not going to do that kind of thing. It was a goal all day long.
Newcastle were excellent. I wonder how high they can finish. They haven't got the distraction of European football. A couple of their players might go away to the World Cup.
No, absolutely, and I think it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to get some freak results come January, and those teams. I look at Bournemouth, for example. Only got 2 players who are going to the World Cup, so they've got an opportunity to do a bit of warm weather training, almost have a mini pre-season So clearly the squads who aren't going to be decimated by World Cup call-ups should be in a better position to hit the ground running when football returns. One unsung hero for Newcastle, someone I think has been excellent this season, by the way, is the man who made the first goal with that long ball up to Callum Wilson. Fabian Schär has been a real hero in that back four. Where can they finish? I don't think the top six is beyond the realms of fantasy, but if they are to do that, then one of the established big six are going to miss out. Could be Darren's beloved Liverpool.
We might get to them in just a second. It probably won't be Arsenal, who drew 1-1, dropping points for only the second time this season.
Southampton won, Arsenal won, but only for the second time this season did the Gunners drop points.
You never give up, but you always fight until the end, and sometimes you get the reward, and today we get it.
We have to play better, we have to make better decisions, quicker decisions, more consistent decisions, especially in ball possession, and we didn't.
They do still lead the league, but they did play poorly, especially second half against Southampton. They actually should have won the game in that first 45 minutes. I know, Crook, you were commentating on that, and I was covering it for the Sunday session. I thought they were brilliant in the first half, very quick, caused problems for Southampton. Southampton were lucky to still be in the game after 15 minutes, and then they slackened off. They were a little bit passive. And I wonder, Darren, if they're a little bit, and it was 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, and then 1-1. The last four games for Arsenal. I wonder whether they've slowed a little bit because Mikel Arteta has insisted in playing some of their bigger hitters in the Europa League on Thursday nights in this bid to get first place. They've secured that now.
I think you might be onto something there, because I think there have been one or two games in the Europa League where I've been surprised to see some of the bigger hitters in the Europa League. But if you're Arsenal and you're going great guns and the priority is to finish in the top four, well, really you want to keep all your biggest weaponry for that competition. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they've hit a wall because they've not gone the course and the distance before. And they say this every time people say, can Arsenal beat City to the league? City have won 4 of the last 5 Premier Leagues. They know how to negotiate this terrain. Arsenal haven't. They're novices as far as this is concerned. So they were always going to hit a wall. But I think you're right. It doesn't help that they've been playing some of their bigger hitters in the Europa League and not keeping them fresh to maybe go as far as they can.
Should they have had a penalty, Crook?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was almost identical to the Scott McTominay challenge that gave Chelsea their penalty the day before, which I'm not going to argue about. I thought it was naive, lazy defending from McTominay. And it was the same.
We're not there yet. Don't start trying to get your little defences in early.
No defence.
It was a penalty. On what we're doing.
It was a penalty at Stamford Bridge, and it should have been a penalty at St Mary's. And this is where it gets so infuriating: is the inconsistencies. You know, what's given as a penalty one day is not given as a penalty 24 hours later. And clearly, that was decisive to the outcome, because if Arsenal get the opportunity to go 2-0 up, Southampton don't come back. I think the big difference between Arsenal and Manchester City, and I was expecting a flood of calls from moaning Arsenal fans on our programme on Sunday night. Didn't happen, because I think they accept the fact that actually City will win the league. And if they finish in the top 4, which they're very much on course to do, that would be seen as a sign of progress. But the difference is, in that opening half an hour, when they ran all over Southampton, City would have been 3-0 up and the game would have been put to bed. Arsenal don't seem to have that clinical edge in terms of putting teams to the sword. They've not really done that on too many occasions this season. And Gabriel Jesus, by the way, the goals have really dried up for him. Is it none in 4 now, I think, in the Premier League?
Well, the thing about Gabriel Jesus is, and I said this at the beginning of the season, I don't think that you can have a go at him, because he's done a brilliant job. He's been one of their best players. Martinelli's been excellent. So has Saka. He leads the line so brilliantly and leads the press so well. And he does so much work off the ball.
And there goes the final whistle. Listen to the reaction here.
Yeah, I understand their frustrations, and it's my responsibility to get this team performing better and finding ways to get wins.
We are really happy, but if you switch off on this, if you do something different in the next few games, the bad things will come. And you don't want, we have to keep going.
8 games now without a win for Jesse and his troops. 6 defeats in that time. They've picked up 2 points since those giddy heights of beating Chelsea at Elland Road. Look, I've said it to you before. I actually don't think they're that bad, Leeds. They have good spells in games, and there's moments where I think they look like a really good team. But there are other moments where they're just far too open. And yesterday, it was obvious from the first minute that Fulham were going to have them. Now, it took a while, actually, for Fulham to put them to the sword, and they conceded the first goal. But I actually thought this game's so obvious, they're going to open up and Fulham are going to get in behind them and score goals. And Mitrovic obviously is a handful. They did exactly that. They ended up winning the game and they won it well in the end, Crook.
Yeah, they did. And Fulham, I think I'm right in saying, as we record this, are 7th in the Premier League table. They're 18 points on the board, probably halfway to safety. So Marco Silva deserves a lot of credit for what he's done there this season. But I'll stick by what I said on Friday when it comes to Jesse Marsch. He was brought in to do a job last season. They were going down under Marcelo Bielsa. I mean, absolutely no doubt about that. Marsch kept them up. Obviously, they backed him in the summer. They brought in a lot of players that he knows from his time in Germany and some Americans as well. And I think he does need time. You know, I think it's far too early to make a judgment on Jesse Marsch. Yes, they're on a bad run. It wasn't that long ago. They played Chelsea off the park at Ellen Road. So there is something there. And again, you know, I think Leeds fans have short memories. Those chanting negative comments towards Jesse Marsch in the last couple of games, he literally kept you up last season. So give the guy a break.
Sacked in the morning at full time. Similar chance in the away end at Leicester on Thursday night. I don't think Jesse Marsch does himself too many favours with the sort of over-aggressive portrayal that the demeanour that he strikes on the touchline. But I do think that he does need a little bit more time because this is clearly someone who has been bought into by the Leeds board. He seems to think he's got the full backing of them. And I do believe that actually, you know, we had a phone call yesterday on the Sunday session. We always take phone calls at 4:00 after the 2 p.m. games. And there was a Leeds fan who rung up and said, we should be beating teams like Fulham and Crystal Palace. We're Leeds United. We deserve more than this. And at one point I just said, hold on, fella, you do remember that there was a 16-year period when you weren't in the top flight. Those teams were. So you can't live on your history. You're still a massive club. You've still got a great support. You are big in the game. But at this moment in time, you're a club that's rebuilding slowly to get themselves to be part of the staple diet of the Premier League again, Darren. Not necessarily looking to achieve a top 10 finish. Leeds United's biggest aim this season is staying in the division again.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the delusion that I'm hearing, and fans may listen to this and say, oh my goodness, so you're saying we're deluded for wanting our team to win matches? Of course not. What I'm saying represents delusion. It's the idea that the first season back in a Premier League is going to be plain sailing, because it isn't. You're making a huge step up into a division where if you make a mistake, you are punished. It's unforgiving. It's relentless. The intensity of the top division is so tough for teams to deal with that you can't just cope with it after one transfer window. Yes, some teams do have a good run of form, like a Bournemouth, but like a Fulham. But, you know, Bournemouth, one of their managers got sacked too soon, I would add, because Gary O'Neill is showing that you can make it work if you have a little bit of patience and the right set of skills. I just think as far as Jesse Marsch is concerned, he will get things right, but they've got to be patient with him. And you know what? I mentioned Arsenal earlier. Maybe most teams, maybe all teams should do a documentary to show what clubs go through season in, season out, so that supporters can understand the context of what is a roller coaster ride. There are too many fans who believe Premier League football is easy when it takes experience, know-how, quality, and a little bit of luck.
Aston Villa 4, Brentford 0. Steven Gerrard sacked on Thursday. Aston Villa started like a train on Sunday.
Aston Villa 4, Brentford 0. It's Ollie Watkins who's got his name deservedly on the score sheet.
We wanted a fast start. We wanted to bring energy to the stadium today to try and get the crowd to come with us. And I thought we did that.
I think it's very simple to summarize this game. Don't get down 1-0 after 2 minutes, 2-0 after 7 minutes, and 3-0 after 40 minutes.
Now, Gerrard lost his last 4 games, scored 1 goal. 14 minutes without him, they scored 3 goals. I mean, the players clearly have responded to the sacking. I'm not necessarily sure that's a good thing, actually. I mean, obviously, I think we've all sort of discussed the man management situation with Stephen and the Tyrone Mings thing and the damage that obviously did do. And, you know, the dressing room, we hear stuff that, you know, comes out of that dressing room and it did have a damaging effect. But just the whole sort of demeanour that he had around the training ground didn't particularly resonate with some of the players. I mean, it looked like an obvious decision to replace him now, and obviously the response has been great. But does it tell us something about the players that they could click into gear, bearing in mind most of those players were involved under Stephen?
Yeah, Darren Ambrose got a bit of stick from Villa fans on the boot room on Sunday for labelling the Villa players a disgrace. But I kind of understand where he's coming from, because as much as I didn't think Steven Gerrard was a particularly good manager for Aston Villa, you compare the performance at Fulham, even without the sending off, which has obviously subsequently been overturned, which will be a source of frustration for Gerrard. You compare that performance to what we saw, particularly in the first half on Sunday. It's hard to believe that it was largely the same team. So I do think the players need to have a look at themselves. The flip side is, well, clearly Steven Gerrard wasn't doing his job properly because he wasn't able to motivate the players to produce that kind of display. And there were a couple of tactical tweaks as well. Villa fans calling in were saying John McGinn should have been taken out of the side a long time ago. That surprises me because I watch him a lot for Scotland and he's one of their key men. Coutinho, less surprising. Villa fans were saying Steven Gerrard gave him far too much time, far too many minutes. So I think that, the caretaker team deserves some credit for making those tactical changes. It was a really good Aston Villa performance. But I tell you what, we're talking about relegation. I think there are 10 or 11 teams who could be in the relegation scrap this season. And when Brentford are bad, they are really bad. And I don't think Ivan Toney was over-egging it when he described their performance as shambles. They were terrible.
Truly awful away from home. No wins away this season. Look, we didn't get to chat too much about Steven Gerrard on Friday's pod because of the overnight experience with the game being on Thursday night, Darren. But I do feel a little bit for Steven because he is a Premier League legend who I think the game should cherish and use and get the best out of.
I think that if you bring somebody into your football club and you give them the mandate to change things, then you've got to give them the time to change things as well. I don't think yesterday was particularly impressive. Yesterday simply tells me that the players were not doing enough for Steven Gerrard. And when you bring a manager into your football club in, you need to give him the time to bring in his players. Some of those players didn't want to play for him. Perhaps he should have been given the time to send them to other clubs and to bring in the ones that he wanted. And lots of people say, the players should look at themselves. The players won't, because they never do. They just do a job, and it's far easier to get rid of the manager than the players. But he didn't get enough time. He lost his centre-half as soon as he bought him from Sevilla in the summer. Coutinho's let him down badly. McGinn, it wasn't a good fit. I don't necessarily blame him. He gave him the captaincy. He is a good player, as you've been saying, Crook. And the forwards haven't been scoring enough goals, and suddenly they start scoring yesterday. Let's see if they can keep this run up. But I think there was a reason that Steven Gerrard was there in the first place. You could argue they didn't give Dean Smith enough time after he'd taken him up. They threw him over the board at the first sign of trouble. They are doing it all wrong at Villa. They've panicked again. And the calibre of manager they want in, people are talking about your Thomas Franks and your Pochettinos. Why would they go to a club that quivers at the first sign of trouble and throws you overboard, rather than giving you time to build a team, build a philosophy, and build a long-term structure that is stable?
Darren, that is like a text message conversation that Crook and I had just last week. Why would Thomas Frank, why would Maurizio Pochettino go and work at Aston Villa when Thomas Frank has got a really good situation at Brentford? Maurizio Pochettino can stay on the sidelines for a little bit longer and wait for one of the big jobs to come up. Something will come up eventually. What can he achieve with Aston Villa? What can anyone achieve with Aston Villa, the way it's being run at this moment in time? The owners keep telling us that they're ambitious. Well, I didn't see that ambition during the summer in terms of outlay of new players. Wolves 0, Leicester City 4. Patience is a virtue. Brendan Rodgers, stand up, fella. Take a bow. 10 points from 15. Well done. Back-to-back wins for Leicester. Huge boost for Rodgers out of the relegations.
It's Wolves 0, Leicester 4. Vardy there in the 6-yard box doing what he does best.
Now, fantastic win in what was a pressure game, but we played some fantastic football, scored great goals and showed that resilience that we've been shown.
Terrific interview afterwards, as always, with Brendan, who's very good at fronting up, saying we were always calm. We make sure that we are being a little bit sensible about things and never getting overexcited. The truth of the matter of this game is that actually Leicester weren't that good. They won 4-0 with 4 shots on target. Started off by one of the goals of the season from Yuri Tielemans' group.
Oh, What a strike that was, by the way. Few points on this game. 4 clean sheets in 5 games now. I think Wout Faes, who had a bit of a shocker in the game that I covered at Bournemouth, has quickly acclimatised to the Premier League. I think he's been a massive influence on their defence. And Danny Ward, like Brendan Rodgers, actually, I kept faith with Danny Ward in my fantasy team because he's cheap. And he started to reward me now with a couple of clean sheets. And credit to Brendan Rodgers.
Hold on. You said it was the worst number 1 in the Premier League.
I did, but I kept him in the team. And credit to Brendan Rodgers because he has rebuilt Ward's confidence and he's starting to actually look like he can be a Premier League goalkeeper. But you're right to mention that Leicester weren't perhaps as good as the scoreline suggests. Wolves, in contrast, had about 300 shots on goal and couldn't score. Therein lies the problem. And I do worry for Wolves because I do think their managerial situation, and it's not necessarily the fault of the owners when it comes to Mick Beale's scenario. They thought he would come. They were given nods that he would come, and he decided to stay at Queen's Park Rangers. As a result of that, they now have an interim team in charge. We're told until 2023, if they keep losing 4-0, they might have to go back on that. This does bear similarities with the Mick McCarthy, Terry Connor situation, and I do fear a bit for Wolves.
I thought that what they would do, because they were good in other areas of the pitch, but they missed out on European football because they couldn't score goals and kill off teams that were there for the taking. And I thought they would go out and make 1 striker, maybe even 2, a priority, but they didn't. And, they ended up bringing in, 78-year-old Diego Costa. And while it might be good for social media memes of chains and lions and all that, he simply cannot do it anymore, which is why he's not playing in the La Liga, which is an easier league to compete in than the Premier League. It might have a lot of quality, but in terms of competitiveness, it's an easier league to compete in. He simply can't do it anymore. But then, if you were going to change manager, which I think was incredibly harsh, maybe that was the time to do it. Sacking Bruno Lage, as you've rightly said, with no replacement, believing somebody would come because you're Wolves, but Michael Beale's clearly looked at the structure there, as I've been saying before, and decided, do I have supportive people around me? Do I have the framework to be able to do my job and not get thrown overboard at the first sign of trouble? I don't think I do. You're all right, thanks. I'm going to stay where I am under Les Ferdinand, who does have a long-term vision and a plan and conditions for me to be able to do my job properly. And I think that now it's going to be hard to sell Wolves to another manager because they're second from bottom. They're in a horrendous run of form. They can't score goals. And whoever takes over is going to have to carry the can for that. They're going to struggle.
Yeah, talking of players that haven't been able to score goals, Jamie Vardy's gone through the leanest patch that he's had in his Premier League career for 7.5 years. But he has become the first player in his 30s to score 100 Premier League goals. He's older than Darren, yet he's powered by Red Bull. He comes on, delivers, peak celebration, love it, great to see. Love a little bit of the old. Where was the sweets as well? I wanted those too. Brilliant. I loved it from Jamie Vardy. He was embracing his own character, and he is his own character. If you ever meet him, he's completely different to any other Premier League footballer. He doesn't fit into the mould in any way, shape, or form. He is he's a good guy, and he scored a lot of goals, and he deserves all the plaudits that come his way. As do Nottingham Forest.
Back into the air, it's smuggled towards goal, comes back to Iwuanyu, and he scored against the club that sold him last summer to put Nottingham Forest into the lead.
He defended brilliantly, looked a threat, and dare I say we could have scored 1 or 2 more.
What a game, what a result, what a victory for Nottingham Forest, breathing life into their season with a mammoth scalp of Liverpool. Liverpool had great chances, but Forest's game plan worked to a treat. And I must say, I met with Steve Cooper in the morning of the game, and we sat and chatted over a cup of tea. And he said to me, look, we may not get anything out of today, but I knew that over the course of the early part of the season, I couldn't keep being so open and getting counter-attacked upon. The league is so punishing. You give people chances, they will take them against you, and it will ruin you. So I've had to adapt my principles a little bit, and I've had to sacrifice a little bit of the forward play that I want to do. So we'll sit off a little bit. But also, we don't want to sit off to the point where as soon as we get it, we then do what we did against Wolves, which is kick it long and then just hope for the best. That's not going to help us. I had a word with the players after that game and said, look, we can't do that. We'll never go anywhere because we'll never score a goal in that way. What we've got to do is sit off, win the ball back, turn it over, get the first pass out, and then play. And play in our half and play our way forward, cause them problems. I think we can do it. Now, maybe it won't work out for us today, but that's the way we're going to do it. And to sit at the back of the main stand in the city, at the City Ground, and to watch that game plan come to life in front of you was something to behold, Crook.
Yeah, and again, if we're talking about patience with managers, I think we all feared the worst for Steve Cooper after that hammering on talkSPORT against Leicester. To be fair, for once, the Nottingham Forest owner backed his manager, held his nerve, gave him a new contract, and there has been gradual improvement since then. I didn't think Forest necessarily would be able to outscore Liverpool. They've managed to do that. Again, it was a victory built from a solid defensive base. I think they were more ambitious going forward than against Brighton in midweek. I guess that's always going to happen at home, with a raucous City Ground crowd. So credit to Forest. And this is the type of result that can transform a season. I guess the big challenge now is how they back it up. If they can pick up a few more victories, a few more points before the World Cup break, then they'll be in a really good position to try and launch a survival fight in the second half of the season. Have to caveat that and say that Liverpool team, I feared the worst when I saw it. James Milner, veteran, out of position at right back. Two youngsters, Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott in midfield. A lot of pressure on the shoulders of Carvalho, probably earlier in his development than Liverpool would have expected. That first 11 for Liverpool looked a long, long way off being title challengers, maybe even being challengers for the top four. That was a Carabao Cup team, let's be honest.
Darren, what's the problem with Liverpool? I asked Jurgen Klopp this. I asked him whether or not he thought that the 63 games last season, going right to the very end of every competition, had its toll on the players, some of which have been injured. Jota, Diaz, out for long periods. Nunez picked up another problem, wasn't available at the weekend. Thiago had I think he had an ear infection and couldn't play. That was a last-minute change right at the very start of the game. And Jurgen said, "How do I know?" And I said, "Okay, well, what do you think the problem is then?" And then he said, "Well, maybe it is last season." But he was in very spiky mood and he's very stressed and he's got every right to be, hasn't he? Because this is a team that is actually now probably fighting to be in the top four.
I think that they're a Liverpool side in transition. I think there are lots of players at that club that are coming to the end of the road. I think there are players that are good players but have injury issues that I can't really see an end to. And those players had injury issues before they arrived at the club. I'm thinking of people like Matip, and I'm thinking of people like Thiago. Naby Keita always seems to be injured as well. And I just wonder if Liverpool are going to progress from this, that there are going to be a few changes at various points. The likes of Harvey Elliott and Carvalho clearly are too young, but they're very good, very capable players, but they're very much for the future. And I just think that we are midway through a transitional period for Liverpool. They're not bad players. There is zero pressure on Klopp. Liverpool are not stupid. They're going to keep hold of him. But I just think this is going to be another difficult season, much like the one that Liverpool had when Van Dijk wasn't available, but nobody panicked because they all knew that once he was back, they'd be back. And they came within a point of winning the league and within a couple of games of the quadruple. So I think as far as Liverpool are concerned, it's all about change. And once those changes are made, we'll see a different Liverpool.
Talking of change, there seems to be a change in the priorities of Virgil van Dijk when getting 4 yards from goal and having the ability to head it into the net. He thought it'd probably be a good idea to try and pass it back to somebody else or just hit it straight at Dean Henderson. Dean Henderson was excellent, to be honest with you, and anyone who wears a cap from the club shop certainly deserves a vote of confidence. But Liverpool did miss several chances. Van Dijk guilty. But actually, Forest missed a couple of big chances as well. Brennan Johnson was guilty of missing a chance towards the end of that game. And Alisson had to make a superb save towards the end of the match too. So, it wasn't just a fortunate victory. It was a well-designed, tactical, thought-out victory from Nottingham Forest, and they deserve their applause as a result of that. Talking of thought-out tactical games. Chelsea won, Manchester United won.
They've got themselves an equaliser deep into stoppage time. Casemiro, I think it is.
He's playing brilliant. And what you say, he's getting better and better every minute of the game.
Over the course of the game, points, fair results.
It was so boring until the end. And the best bit was the VAR, which tells you something, doesn't it, Crook?
Again, I'm going to disagree. I thought United's performance for the first half an hour was excellent. And if they had that clinical edge, then I think they would have been a couple of goals up and would probably have been in a good position to win the match. I think it turned into a chess game once Graham Potter made his tactical tweak, and credit to him, he realised that Chelsea were being overrun. And actually, by making the change that he did very early, taking off Cucurella and bringing on an extra midfielder, he wrestled control away from Manchester United. I'm still encouraged with what I'm seeing from United. You know, I don't mind the chessboard because it shows that finally there's a manager who actually has a bit of tactical awareness. You can see a group of players who are being properly coached. I think he's handled the Ronaldo situation brilliantly. And I love the reaction from Casemiro, you know, a 5 times Champions League winner, a seasoned international, someone who's achieved just about all there is to achieve in the game. Just the unbridled passion and joy when he scored a terrific header to equalise. I put a picture on social media of that celebration. My caption was mentality monster. I nicked it from Jurgen Klopp, but that's what Casemiro brings. I think he's been a terrific signing, and I think United finally are moving forward. There are going to be bumps in the road, but I think I'm going to enjoy this season.
I'm pleased that actually you've stopped comparing yourselves to Everton and now you're back to comparing yourselves to Liverpool again. Darren, 2 shots on target from Chelsea. Absolutely thrilling.
I think as far as Chelsea are concerned, I'm not. Listen, all the other games were there was, you could find the romance, the excitement, the kind of edge of your seat, white knuckle ride about them. This one was one for the purists, and there's nothing wrong with that because they're 2 of the elite teams in the country. So, and I think there is room for a game for the purists. I think I'm with Crook on this one, you know, Sam. Our kind of bromance has come to a bit of an abrupt end because I think Crook's right. I thought it was an entertaining game. I thought it was a fascinating matchup between two teams that are resurgent, and certainly the clean sheet record under Potter has been better than it had been under Tuchel until he was sacked. And as far as Manchester United are concerned, the work rate, the energy, the willingness to compete is back. The appetite is back at United. So it was always going to be a clash of styles. And I thought it was a fair result. I thought it was 2 good sets of players who really did compete. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, totally agree on the fact that it was a fair result. I didn't think it was that exciting for 2 of the best teams in the land. I like exciting football matches. These 2 don't score enough goals. Leicester score more goals than these 2. That needs to improve if they want to be one of the top teams, if they want to compete in the top 4. If they both want to get into the top 4, they're going to have to score more goals. I'm sorry. They just do not entertain enough to score. I mean, when you score a penalty after 87 minutes as well, you have to win the game by hook or by crook. And the fact is that Chelsea should never have conceded that goal. Casemiro should never have got the header in. They should have defended better for it. Yes, I actually felt sorry for Kepa because he got so close to that, got something on it, came off the post and just snuck over the line. I felt sorry for him. And it was maybe I'm tinged by the fact that Chelsea actually dropped 2 points in the game. Maybe. But ultimately, I said to Crook beforehand, this game is always a draw. It's always a draw. Whatever happens, whenever these 2 meet, it always seemingly is a draw.
It's finished Manchester City 3, Brighton of Albion 1, and it's back to winning ways for Pep Guardiola.
Manchester City 3, Brighton 1. Erling Haaland turning full Jonah Lomu versus Adam Webster. Absolutely hilarious. The idea that Adam Webster wanted a foul for that, I thought, hold on, mate, you're a central defender. How dare you even suggest for 1 second that you wanted a free kick there? You're supposed to hold your own. You're supposed to be strong. That wasn't a free kick either. A bit like the Lloris one. He was just stronger than him, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. No arguments. Haven't even got that much to add. Haaland doing Haaland things. Another couple of goals. Webster tried, failed. Goalkeeper, you can understand what he was trying to do, failed. And Haaland is going to shatter the Golden Boot record. I'm still fairly convinced that he's going to get that 50 because I don't know who stops him from scoring the 2s and the 3s. Yeah, when he comes up against the likes of Liverpool and maybe even Chelsea and a team with a plan, he might struggle. But outside of that top 4-5, he will fill his boots.
Crook, how many goals is he going to get? We haven't done our tracker for a while. I'll work it out while you're telling us.
Yeah, I think I agree with Darren. He'll get 50. If he stays fit, he gets picked week in, week out. Obviously, he's not got the distraction of a World Cup mid-season. And I think it's still only Scott Parker and Jurgen Klopp who've managed to find a way to stop him scoring. He is an absolute beast. I actually thought Brighton at times played quite well, a bit more decisive in the final third than they have been under De Zerbi, but was still well beaten. So I think what's fascinating when we come to talking about the title is that even Arsenal fans are saying, well, nobody catches Manchester City. Arsenal are top of the table, and they're not really even being talked about as title contenders because we just expect this City juggernaut to keep rolling and rolling.
I said on this podcast that I'd worked out statistically that over the course of the season, the Premier League season, I'm not even talking about overall goals, I'm talking about Premier League goals, that this guy, Erling Haaland, would get 55. I said it on Monday night game night, the first one that we did over the course of the season. And then I said, obviously, he's not going to get 55 goals because something will happen. Statistically now, he is on for 58.7 Premier League goals. So he isn't slowing down. He's getting faster. This is a real concern.
I said that every time I say to people he's going to score 50 goals, they look at me as though I've got two heads. And yet, as you've always said, the projection has been that he is going to score a ridiculous amount of goals. And people don't understand it. If he scored this many, he is 5 away from the total for last season's, 6 away from the total for last season's Golden Boot. And he has another 9 months to do it. He is not going to the World Cup. If he stays fit, he will set a record that only he will beat. Nobody else will do in the Premier League.
He's basically selling those blue filter glasses to everyone, isn't he? I mean, we're all going out and getting a pair of those. It's going to change our lives as much as this. I do want to touch on the VAR. I don't like battering them too often, but they had a terrible day at Manchester City where they gave a penalty that wasn't a penalty, and they didn't give a penalty which clearly was a penalty. And actually, the one that they didn't give, which was the Sanchez challenge on Haaland, was bad because that's what VAR is for. The referee was never going to see that from where he was because the foot was high up on the ankle and he was on the wrong side. But VAR should have said, well, actually, that was a bad challenge. That's a penalty. Whereas the Bernardo Silva one, I mean, it was a dive.
Yeah, I guess the only positive is that it didn't change the outcome, the result, because Manchester City benefited from one wrong decision and were on the wrong end of the other. So they'd have won anyway. But yeah, again, I think it was a bad weekend for VAR. I've mentioned the Gabriel Jesus one. It's just an absolute mess at the moment, to be honest. You know, the sooner that Howard Webb gets in situ and tries to take a grasp of the situation and tries to improve the overall standard of officiating and the way the technology is used, the better, because you can't say anything positive. You know, week in, week out, game in, game out. Look at the Douglas Luiz situation, for example. The VAR have decided that was a red card. The referee has then agreed it's a red card. 2 days later, it gets overturned. Madness. How can that happen? How could two officials get a decision so badly wrong?
Well, that's wrong. That's actually technically wrong. You cannot, for whatever reason, there's no excuse for it. You can't have a referee on a pitch making a decision. You can't have a fourth official being the eyes and ears on the sideline. You can't have a VAR, an assistant VAR, and then decide the next day that they're all stupid and got it wrong and sent someone off, so we're going to change it anyway. No, that independent panel should not exist anymore. You've got VAR, get rid of it. That's the first thing that needs to go. The second thing is it was a sending off. It was a sending off. There was absolutely no reason to rescind that red card. He obviously put his head into the face of Mitrovic. So it is a sending off. It was the right call. Stop moaning, crack on. Why you've wasted all that money and time by convening an independent panel to rescind a red card, which a VAR has had a look at and the referee has had a look at, is absolutely ludicrous. What a waste of time and money. Everton 3, Crystal Palace 0. Final game to look at.
And there's the full-time whistle. And a huge ovation
in terms of football and an overall performance that you want to see from an Everton team. This felt like an Everton team.
You know, we want to improve our performances overall. We need to win games, but we need to perform in a different way.
Can we just all stand and applaud Frank Lampard? Well done, Frank. Well done, Frank. And I'll tell you why we should applaud Frank Lampard, because you all have a go at him and tell him he's a rubbish coach and all this kind of stuff, right? But ultimately, can I just tell you two things? Goal number 2 and goal number 3. Watch those back and just salivate. What a goal that second goal was. And can we just say, Alex Iwobi, mwah, wonderful. What a player he has done. He has turned out to be. Reborn under Frank Lampard, given his head. He looks like the player that Arsene Wenger said England should make sure they look after. They didn't. He's gone and played for Nigeria now. But anyway, he looks like that player now, doesn't he? He's been sensational.
And again, credit to Frank Lampard and his coaching staff for coaching the best out of him finally. I'm not going to apologise to Frank Lampard, but I'm going to say that maybe we haven't put enough respect on his name, because I think he's done a terrific job at Everton. When you look at where they were when he came in, he united the fan base. He's got a feel-good factor around Goodison Park. They're much better defensively. They've got Calvert-Lewin fit now. He's not been able to call upon him too often in his reign. And from a side that I thought would be possible relegation contenders, we're now looking at Everton and asking, can they squeak into the top half? He's done a terrific job, no question.
Quick word on the two big characters. Proper fellas, I'm told, in the dressing room that look after some of the younger members of the team, that have raised the standards amongst the whole group. James Tarkowski and Connor Cody. Should they be in the... Well, Cody's in the conversation for the England squad. He'll be in the England squad. But should Tarky be in there as well, Darren?
I think both of them are terrific players. And if you're talking about England squads and players in form, yeah, they should be in the conversation. Listen, I'm not surprised. I don't have any real reason to issue any apologies, because my message has been consistent all the way through since the start of the season. I've always felt that the recruitment was very common sense at Goodison Park. I've always felt that there were far too many players that were vanity signings under the previous management, probably inspired by the regime as well. But he's come in and put round pegs in round holes, 2 good leaders at the back, 3 influential players in Iwobi, Idrissa Gueye and Onana, who West Ham fans will be ever so slightly disappointed not to have had, given that he was theirs first and they wouldn't pay the money for him. And it's very simple now that they've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin back. They've got someone who can grab goals.
11th at the moment, Everton. If they finish in 11th, they'll be absolutely delighted, I think, with that. And so they should be. Palace, though, away from home, especially a big concern. No win on the road since they beat Southampton in April. That probably doesn't really count anyway. So it's been a long time since they put points on the board on their travels. And Patrick Vieira just said afterwards, he's very honest, Patrick. He just said, we were rubbish. We didn't play very well at all. It was a terrible team performance. And that can't continue. They're much better at home than they are away. They're much better later in games than they are in the early stages of matches. But if you're already 3-0 down by that stage, it doesn't really help. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Game night returns Monday night. Salzburg against Chelsea Tuesday night on talkSPORT 2. Wednesday night, we've got Barcelona versus Bayern on talkSPORT 2 as well. And game day next week takes us to Leicester City. Leicester City against Manchester City. That will be fun. And then in the evening, we've got the match between Liverpool and Leeds at 7:45 on Saturday night.